My family turned me into their ATM to fund my Parasite brother, but when I promised them an $8,000 trip to the Bahamas, I left them stranded at the airport and exposed everything on Facebook with the recording. I'm 25 years old. I work in tech and have been for like 3 years now. And I need to tell this story because what my parents and older brother did to me basically turned me into their personal ATM for months. And when I say ATM, I'm not exaggerating at all. The thing is that it all started in a super innocent way. I mean, they sold it as something innocent, but looking back, I should have seen it coming from the beginning because the signs were all there. I was just too naive or maybe too much of a good person to realize they were manipulating me from day one. I guess I should start with the context, so you understand how I ended up in such a ridiculous situation. My brother Chase is 27 years old, 2 years older than me, and he's basically lived with my parents his entire adult life without working or contributing absolutely anything to the house. When I say he doesn't work, I mean he literally hasn't had a real job in like 5 years. Maybe more. I'm not totally sure of the exact dates, but it's been a long time. My parents always had excuses for him, that he was looking for work, that the job market was tough, that he needed time to find something he was really passionate about. All those typical phrases people use when they don't want to admit someone is just lazy and doesn't want to do anything with their life. I, on the other hand, graduated from college like 3.5 years ago, got a decent job at a tech company. Nothing amazing, but it pays well, like around $65,000 a year, which for someone my age at that time was pretty good. I moved into an apartment with a roommate, Hunter, who was my friend from college and who I got along with really well, honestly. Things were going normal. I paid my part of the rent, my expenses, went out on weekends, basically had an independent adult life like any person my age should have. So, like a year and a half ago, my parents invited me to dinner on a Sunday, nothing out of the ordinary. I went to dinner with them maybe once a month, sometimes less, depending on how busy I was with work. I got to the house. My mom had cooked lasagna, which was always my favorite food when I was a kid, and everything seemed super normal until we finished eating, and my dad started with his speech. He told me, "Wyatt, your mother and I have been thinking a lot lately about your financial situation," and I thought, there? My financial situation? I mean, I wasn't drowning in debt or anything like that, but anyway, I let him continue. Basically, they told me I was throwing money away, paying rent when I could be saving to buy my own house someday, that they had my room available and I could move back in with them for a while, save money, and then, when I had enough for a down payment, I could buy something of my own. The truth is that, at the time, it seemed like a pretty reasonable idea, My parents were being good to me, offering me help so I could advance financially, and they also mentioned it would be good for the family to be more united, that they missed me. All those things that make you feel guilty if you say no. My mom even got a little emotional talking about how much she missed having me in the house. That the house felt empty without me, which was weird because Chase was literally there all the time. But whatever. They told me I didn't have to pay rent, just contribute to household expenses fairly, like help with food and stuff, and that everything else I could save. I spent like 2 weeks thinking about it, talked to Hunter, and he told me he understood if I wanted to do it, that there was no problem finding another roommate. In the end, I decided yes, that it was a good opportunity to really save money and be able to buy something of my own eventually. So, like a year and 3 months ago, I moved back to my parents' house, to my childhood bedroom that still had old posters of bands I liked in high school, which was kind of depressing, I'm not gonna lie. The first few weeks were pretty good. I mean, it was weird going back to living with my parents after having had my independence, but nothing terrible. My mom cooked, I came home from work, we had dinner together, all very family-like and pleasant. But then the conversations about money started. My dad told me that, although he wasn't going to charge me rent as such, it would be fair for me to contribute $400 a month for general household expenses, utilities, internet, those things. It seemed reasonable to me. It was much less than what I paid in rent before, so I said yes without problem. Then my mom told me that since I ate at the house, I should contribute to food expenses too, and she asked me for $300 more a month for groceries. Again, it seemed fair to me, so I accepted. Total, I was paying $700 a month, which was still quite less than my previous rent, which was like $850 plus utilities. So technically, I was still saving money, right? Except things started getting weird really fast. Like in the second month of being there, I came home from work one day and Chase had a new PlayStation 5 inches his room, one of those that cost like $500 at that time because they were still hard to get. I asked him where he got it from and he said, "Oh, Mom and Dad bought it for me as a late birthday present." His birthday had been like 6 months before, but whatever. It wasn't my money, so I didn't say anything, although it seemed weird to me. The next month, Chase showed up with a new iPhone, the latest model that cost easily $1,000. Again, gift from the parents. And I started noticing a pattern. You know, every month or every 2 months, Chase would receive something new and expensive while I was there paying $700 monthly, supposedly to help with household expenses. It started bothering me, but I didn't want to cause drama, because my parents had always favored Chase, since we were kids, so it wasn't anything new really, just more obvious now that we were all living together again. Then, like in the 4th month of being there, my mom told me that food expenses had gone up a lot, and she needed me to contribute $450 instead of $300. I asked her why they had gone up so much, and she said something vague about inflation and that we were eating better. The truth is, I was eating exactly the same as before. But, whatever. I gave the extra money because I didn't want to seem cheap or selfish. Then my dad told me that the family car insurance had gone up, and since I used the car sometimes to go to work, my personal car was in the shop for an engine problem that took weeks to fix. I should contribute $200 more a month. There I was already paying like $1,350 monthly, which was more than what I paid when I lived with Hunter. But every time I tried to say something, my parents would make me feel guilty, telling me it was part of contributing to the family, that they did a lot for me, that I should be grateful to have a place to live. The straw that broke the camel's back was when one day I got home early from work because we had a canceled meeting, and I heard my mom talking on the phone with my aunt. She was in the kitchen, and I came in through the back door, so she didn't hear me arrive. I heard her literally say, "Yes, thank God Wyatt is helping so much with expenses. Now we can give Chase what he needs without worrying. It's like having an extra income in the house." I froze there at the door, you know? Because at that moment, everything made sense all at once. They hadn't asked me to move back to help me save money. They had asked me to move back so they could use my money to finance Chase's lifestyle. I felt literally sick to my stomach. I walked into the kitchen and my mom got all nervous when she saw me, hung up the phone super quick, and asked me what I was doing there so early. I told her I had heard her conversation and we needed to talk. She tried to deny it all, saying I had misunderstood, that she was just talking about how nice it was to have the family together, all obvious lies. I told her I wanted to see the utility bills, the car insurance, everything, because I was starting to suspect the numbers didn't add up. My mom got super defensive and told me it was very disrespectful of me to doubt them after everything they had done for me, that they had given me a roof, food, and I was being ungrateful. But I was already too angry to let myself be manipulated again, so I insisted. Eventually, my dad came home from work, and my mom told him I was being difficult, and he took her side, obviously, telling me I didn't need to see any receipts, that I should trust them. That's when Chase came down the stairs to see what all the commotion was about, and when he saw we were arguing about money, he had the nerve to tell me I was selfish. That family is supposed to help each other, and that just because he was going through a difficult time didn't mean I shouldn't contribute more. I asked him what difficult time exactly, because as far as I knew, he spent his days playing video games while I worked 8 or 9 hours daily. He got furious and yelled at me that I didn't understand his situation, that looking for work was very stressful. All the typical garbage he always said to justify his laziness. The argument got more and more intense, like everyone yelling at the same time, and I told them it had been a mistake to come back to the house, that they had clearly manipulated me to be their income source, to keep Chase in his life of luxury without having to work. My mom started crying. My dad told me I was being dramatic, and Chase told me if I didn't like it, I could leave. So that was exactly what I decided to do. I went up to my room and started packing my stuff that same night. I called Hunter and asked him if I could stay with him temporarily until I found another place, and he said yes without hesitation because he's a true friend, not like my supposed family. My parents tried to stop me. but not because they really cared, but because they were clearly worried about losing my financial contribution. My mom begged me to stay, saying we could work things out, that maybe they had been a bit unfair, but we could reach a better agreement. I told her no, that I had already decided to leave, and nothing they said was going to change my mind. I moved to Hunter's house that same night with what I could pack in my car and came back the next day for the rest of my stuff when my parents were at work. Chase was there, sprawled on the couch watching TV as always, and he told me I was making a mistake. That family is forever and I would eventually regret it. I told him the only thing I regretted was being naive enough to believe they really cared about my well-being and not just my money. Like 6 months passed, during which I didn't talk to any of them. I blocked my parents on my phone because they kept sending me messages, trying to make me feel guilty, saying I was hurting them, that Chase missed me, which was an obvious lie. All those manipulation tactics I already knew very well. I found my own apartment after 2 months living with Hunter, a small but decent place, and I finally had my peace and independence back. Then, like 2 months ago, I received a message from my mom in my email because I hadn't blocked her there. The message was long, like 3 paragraphs, basically saying enough time had passed being separated, that she and my dad felt terrible about what had happened, and that they wanted to make peace with me. She proposed we take a family trip to the Bahamas, all paid for by them, as a way to reconnect and start over. She said they had booked a luxury resort, that it would be a full week, and they really wanted me to go because family was important and they had learned from their mistakes. My first instinct was to say no, but something in the message seemed suspicious to me, too good to be true. So I replied, saying I would think about it, just to see what would happen. A week later, my mom called me, and since I didn't have her blocked on my phone anymore, I answered. She sold me the whole idea of the trip again, told me they had already talked to Chase and he also wanted me to go, that everyone wanted to leave the past behind. She told me they had seen incredible travel packages on the internet that included the flight, the 5-star all-inclusive hotel, and some excursions, and that everything would cost around $8,000 for the 4 of us. That's when I started suspecting more, because $8,000 is a lot of money, and I knew my parents weren't in the best financial situation now that they didn't have my money every month. But I played the game and told her it sounded good, that I would like to see more details before confirming. She told me, perfect, that she would send me all the information, and that if I could take care of making the reservation, it would be easier because I was better with technology and stuff. Huge red flag, obviously, but I didn't say anything yet. I decided to do something that was probably somewhat ethically questionable, but ended up being the best decision I could have made. I went to my parents' house one day that I knew they would be there, but weren't expecting me. I knocked on the door, and my mom was super surprised to see me. I told her I had been thinking about the trip and wanted to discuss the details in person. She let me in, all excited thinking I had fallen into their trap, and we went to the living room where my dad and Chase were too. We started talking about the trip, and I had my phone in my pocket recording everything discreetly, which I know is legally a gray area depending on the state. But honestly, I didn't care at that moment because I needed proof of what I was about to discover. I told them I was seriously considering going, but I needed to understand how the payment thing would work. My mom told me she had already reserved the dates, and I just needed to make the final payment for the packages for everyone, and they would reimburse me for their part when we got back from the trip. I asked her directly, how much would my part be then? And she got a bit uncomfortable and said, well, technically you would be making the complete payment initially, but it's only temporary until we give you the money back. I said, okay, but when exactly would you give it back to me? And my dad intervened, saying, probably like a month after the trip, when they had the money available. Chase was quiet but had this super annoying smile on his face, like he knew exactly what was happening. Then I told them, just to be sure, you're going to reimburse me the $6,000 for your part after the trip, correct? My mom said, yes, of course, and added something about how it was good. I had a credit card with a good limit to make these big reservations. That's when Chase, you couldn't stay quiet and blurted out, plus, Dad and Mom deserve it after everything they've done for you, don't you think? And I said, what exactly have they done besides lie to me and use me as their personal bank? He got angry and said, I had always been the problem child, the one who caused drama, Typical gaslighting. The conversation got tense, but I kept my cool because I knew I was recording everything. I told them yes, I would make the reservation, that it seemed like a good idea to reconnect as a family. My mom was super happy, my dad seemed relieved, and Chase had that satisfied face of someone who thinks they're about to get away with something. After like half an hour more of casual talk where they kept mentioning little things about the trip, I said goodbye and left. On the way to my apartment, I listened to the complete recording, and there was a part where I thought they had spoken quietly, but the phone still managed to capture it, where my dad told my mom something like, "Perfect, he won't suspect anything," and Chase's laugh in the background. That was the moment when I decided I wasn't just not going to fall for their trap, but I was going to teach them a lesson they would never forget. I did exactly what they asked me to. I booked a travel package to the Bahamas for a week. 5-star all-inclusive, resort, flights, everything. Except I only booked for one person, me. I spent like $2,500 of my own money, which hurt a bit because it's not little money, but it was worth every cent for what was about to happen. Then I created fake documents that looked like booking confirmations from the airline and hotel, with all their names and made-up confirmation numbers that looked totally legitimate. I even put specific flight times, seat numbers, all the detailed information to make it look real. I sent them the documents by email like 2 weeks before the trip, along with a message saying everything was ready, that I'd see them at the airport on departure day, and that I was excited to reconnect with them. My mom responded super excited, thanking me profusely, saying she couldn't wait. The whole act. The days before the trip, they kept sending me messages asking what they should pack, if they needed to bring cash, all those typical things from people who are going to travel. The day of the trip arrived, and in the fake documents I had sent them, I put that their flight left at 3 inches the afternoon, when in reality my actual flight left at 10 inches the morning. I went to the airport super early, checked my suitcase, went through security without any problem, and got on my flight completely alone and super relaxed. I turned off my phone before takeoff because I knew what was coming. I landed in the Bahamas like at 5 inches the afternoon local time, got to the resort, which was absolutely incredible, like with ocean view, king-size bed, private balcony, everything you can imagine. I took a shower, changed into comfortable clothes, and then turned on my phone. I had literally 47 missed calls, like 60 text messages, and several voicemails from my parents and Chase. I listened to one of the voicemails where my mom was screaming hysterically, saying something was wrong with the tickets, that they had been told at the airport there was no reservation in their names, that it had been a terrible mistake and they needed me to call them immediately. I didn't respond to them that night. Instead, I went to the resort restaurant, ordered an incredible dinner of lobster and shrimp that probably cost like $80, and enjoyed every bite, knowing my parents and Chase were stuck at home, furious and confused about what had gone wrong. I took pictures of the beach at sunset, of the resort, of my room, of the food, everything, to have evidence of how well I was doing without them. The next day in the morning, after a spectacular buffet breakfast with freshly squeezed orange juice and omelets made to order, I finally responded to them with a simple text message that said, "Made it to the Bahamas safely, the resort is beautiful. I hope you've learned you can't keep manipulating me. Enjoy your time at home." Immediately, calls started coming in that I ignored completely, so I simply blocked their numbers again and kept enjoying my vacation. I spent an absolutely incredible week, like I went snorkeling, went on boat excursions, hung out at the beach with a piña colada in my hand, tried local food at restaurants outside the resort, basically everything I had dreamed of doing on a tropical vacation. Every night I took a picture of the sunset from my balcony and saved them all. Not to rub them in their faces, but to remind myself that I had done the right thing by setting boundaries. I came back home a week later, super relaxed and tanned, and literally the day after arriving, my parents were knocking on my apartment door at 8 inches the morning. I saw them through the peephole. My mom looked furious. My dad too, and Chase was there with Cled, that face of wanting to hit me. I opened the door just a little, with the security chain on because honestly I didn't trust they wouldn't do something drastic. My mom immediately started yelling at me, saying how dare I do that to them, that I had left them stranded at the airport like idiots, that Chase had been excited about the trip and I had ruined it, that I was the cruelest and most vindictive son they could have. My dad added that I should be ashamed of my behavior, That family doesn't do those things to each other, and they expected me to pay them for all the trouble I had caused them, like compensation for the wasted day they spent at the airport trying to resolve a reservation that never existed. Chase was the worst, saying I always knew you were trash, that I never cared about family, that I was selfish and only thought about myself. I told him, really? I'm the selfish one? The guy who worked while you spent your time playing video games that my parents bought with my money? And he turned red with rage and tried to push the door, but the chain stopped it. Then I took out my phone and played them the recording I had made weeks before at their house, where you could clearly hear my mom saying I was going to pay for everything and they would reimburse me later. But then also the part where my dad says I wouldn't suspect anything, and Chase's laugh. The faces of all three were priceless, like total surprise mixed with panic, because they realized I had caught them in their own game. My mom tried to justify herself, saying I had recorded that conversation without their consent, and that was illegal. But I told her frankly, I didn't care, that I had it as backup in case they tried to defame me or cause me problems. I told them this was exactly what they deserved after months of using me as their income source to finance Chase's lifestyle, that they never asked me to move back because they cared about my well-being, but because they needed my money, and it's over, that I would never again allow them to manipulate me. My dad said I was exaggerating, that they would have reimbursed me after the trip, but I told him the recording said otherwise, that they had clearly planned to keep my money and probably give me 1,000 excuses later about why they couldn't pay me. Chase kept yelling that I was a bad son, a bad brother, all those hurtful things people say when they know they lost. I told them to leave my apartment and never come back, that our relationship had ended the day they decided to see me as a walking wallet instead of as a son and brother. My mom started crying, saying, someday I would regret this. That family was the most important thing, but I wasn't affected anymore by their attempts at emotional manipulation. I closed the door in their faces and heard them stay outside yelling for like 5 more minutes before finally leaving. I thought that would be the end of it all, but I was wrong. Like 3 days later, I started receiving messages from uncles, cousins, even my grandmother, all telling me my parents had told them how terrible I had been to them, that I had tricked them with a fake trip just out of cruelty, that I hadn't given them any chance to fix things. Basically, my parents were doing a smear campaign throughout the extended family, painting themselves as the victims and me as the villain. At first, I tried to explain individually to some close relatives what had really happened, but it was exhausting, and besides, many of them had already taken sides with my parents without even hearing my version. My cousin told me that regardless of what had happened, I had crossed a line by doing that fake trip thing to them, that it had been too far. My uncle told me Chase's family, and I should support him in his difficult times, instead of being so selfish. So I made a decision that I know was controversial, but honestly, I felt was necessary. I made a long post on Facebook telling the whole story from the beginning, from when they convinced me to move back to their house until the moment of the Bahamas trip. I included specific details about how much money they took from me, the excuses they gave me, the expensive gifts they bought Chase with my money, everything. And, at the end of the post, I uploaded the audio recording where you could clearly hear their plan to make me pay for the trip with no real intention of reimbursing me. The post went viral among my family and friends, like it got like 200 comments in the first hours. Most people were on my side after hearing the recording, saying my parents had been manipulative, and I had done well to defend myself. Some relatives who had previously criticized me now apologized for having judged without knowing the whole story. There were some who still thought I had gone too far with the trip thing, but most understood why I had done it. My parents obviously found out about the post and showed up at my apartment again, this time even more furious than before. My mom was crying for real now. Not manipulation tears, but tears of genuine humiliation because the whole family had heard the truth. They demanded I delete the post immediately, that I was ruining their reputation, that no one was going to respect them after this. My dad threatened to sue me for defamation, although I knew he had no case, because everything I had published was true, and I had proof. Chase was the most pathetic, saying I had ruined his life, that now everyone in the family saw him as a useless parasite, that they would never respect him. I told him, maybe it was time he took responsibility for his own decisions instead of depending on mom and dad for everything. That he was 27 years old, and it was time to grow up. He told me he hated me and would never forgive me. And honestly, that didn't affect me at all because his opinion stopped mattering to me a long time ago. I told them the post was staying, that I had been clear. I was only telling my truth without exaggerating or lying about anything, and that if they had a problem with that, maybe they should reflect on their own actions instead of blaming me for exposing what they did. My mom tried one last time to appeal to my emotions, saying I was still their son, that they would always love me, but they needed me to fix this mess. I told her there was nothing to fix on my part, that they had created this situation and now had to live with the consequences. That was the last time I saw them in person. A week later, I made a second post on Facebook, much shorter, saying that after much reflection, I had decided to permanently cut contact with my parents and my brother, that I needed to move forward with my life without their toxicity, and asking relatives to respect my decision and not try to convince me to reconcile with them. Some people commented saying it was sad, others saying they supported me. The response was varied. I blocked my parents and Chase on all possible platforms: phone, email, social media, absolutely everything. I asked Hunter and other close friends not to give them information about me if they tried to contact them. And to this day, they've respected that. It's been like 2 months since the last Facebook post, and although occasionally some distant relative sends me a message asking if I've considered forgiving them, most have accepted I made my decision, and they respect it. The truth is, my life has improved so much since I cut them off completely. I don't have the constant stress of feeling like I'm being used. I don't have to deal with comparisons to Chase or my parents' obvious favoritism, and I can focus on building my own life the way I want. I've been saving money for real now. Like I have around $15,000 saved that I plan to use as a down payment for a house eventually, and I feel good about myself for the first time in a long time. Do I regret the fake Bahamas trip? Honestly, no, not one bit. I know some might think I went too far or was vindictive, and maybe they're right in a way, but I felt they needed a lesson about the consequences of manipulating and using people. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle that you can't treat your son like an ATM and expect there to be no repercussions. The trip was my way of telling them I'm not the same naive kid who let himself be manipulated, that I learned to defend myself and set boundaries, and that I won't tolerate that kind of treatment ever again from anyone, family or not. Now I'm focused on my career, my real friendships like Hunter, who was there for me when I needed him, and on building the life I want without the toxic influence of people who only see me as a resource. And honestly, sleeping peacefully knowing no one is taking advantage of me is priceless.